Hello, folks. You have made it better than I have to the first of the series of Chris and Fred shows. I am Chris Blask. That's Fred Cohen. We have names like tags on the screen and everything. We're old cyberpunk folks who've been doing this stuff for a long, long time, and we talk all the time about all this stuff. So this stream is just us having these conversations. So make of it what you will. Hey, Fred.
So aren't you worried that
No.
that when you say something about me and I don't immediately clarify and disagree with you and say, well, no, it's actually this.
Yes, do worry.
Hang on, let me finish. That someday when I'm running for president, it'll come up and they'll say, you lied. You didn't take the time to fix the words about you when you were introduced somewhere. I used to worry about that all the time. And then I just came to the conclusion that screw it, Right. So some people introduce me as really fabulous, okay. Some people don't, it's not that good, but the thing about introducing yourself is it's braggery, and
Right.
I was brought up not to brag, so I just want to say to everybody out there, I am awesome.
No, he is pretty awesome. Really is.
Well,
this is.
So as I got older, and I am older now, I'm older than you at least. As I got older,
already,
and fairly recently, I came to the conclusion that many of the things that I did throughout my life to try to conform were ultimately negatives. They didn't help me get ahead in any way that was meaningful, and largely what they did was made it more difficult to live with myself.
Yep. Well, in ADHD autism spectrum world, that's called masking, right? Where we try to come up with ways to find, how do I adapt to this situation, right? And it doesn't tend to work, right? Worse, it half works, so we keep doing it until, as you say, hopefully, eventually, we go,
So we go. Now let's talk to your audience about strawberries.
Right? Fresh this time of year, coming up. You planted earlier in the year.
Delicious. Oh, yeah. And I live in California, so we get them organic. They're gorgeous, delicious, everything you want. They are low calorie and they are very healthy for you.
Right. And freeze them and they make good hot summer treats, right?
You don't have to freeze them. They're good even not frozen. But yeah, they're okay frozen. But when they're this ripe and this fresh and this red, they're very sweet. And when you freeze them, they lose some of that.
I don't mean freezing for storage. I mean just like when it's really hot out. I'm in Florida.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. You have frozen strawberries, frozen blueberries, stuff like that. Just eat them like popcorn. They're wonderful.
They're okay, but the problem is when they're that cold, you don't get the taste. Somehow your taste buds or the chemicals, that doesn't work quite right. So what I find is that if you put them in the microwave and you get them heated up just to the right level, they're still cool, so they're cooling to your body, but their taste is a little bit more poppy. And I like the taste. I like the poppy taste. No, that's not probably the right thing to say, is it?
Okay.
Just saying.
Where you are. It's all about the crowd, right?
Context is so hugely important. So let's put it in context, Chris. We did about 80 shows of the Cyber Show together.
Yep.
80 of those episodes. So
you say a radio show on CBS in Silicon Valley, and CBS, NBC, a network. See, this is how much it doesn't matter.
Where's my press card? It was in the CBS network. But I had a press pass, and that allowed me to get in absolutely nowhere that I couldn't have otherwise gotten in. But it gave me a piece of plastic or something so that I could claim that I was there legitimately, as opposed to just going in anyway and not worrying about it. When I was younger, I didn't ask as much permission as I should. And then I got a little bit older and I got to the point where I would only do things with permission. And I got to the point where, for example, we have clients now, and I will not do anything on their computer. I will tell them things. I will advise them on what to do. I will watch them do it. I will opine on what they do, but I will not touch anything that causes any change on their computer.
Keep it simple.
No, just keep out of jail. which is simple. I mean, it's simpler to not be in jail, I would say.
Oh.
Well, so I got, you remember, what was it, 2005, 2006, ABC named me the most famous hacker of all time or something, which is crazy because I never did any computer crime, and everybody else on the list was computer criminals. But part of the thing about being a famous hacker, which, as we all know, is not in any way a bad thing, right, is that now people are looking at you. And, if most of my magic doesn't work that well if you look closely enough. My card tricks, if you're staring right in there, you say, I see what he did. It's much better being a magician from just the right distance and the right point of view, context, right?
Well, as you know, I've always loved that level of abstraction, like misdirection. All this, so I'm playing with, you see the DMX stage lighting I have on the back walls here, and in the midst of all the cybersecurity stuff, explaining how we manage to manipulate and influence other people by how we stand, the words you use and don't use, and the way that sort of stuff. It's just fascinating, right?
By my failed attempt to find a deck of cards on my desk, I can't believe there's no deck of cards on my desk.
Well, you magically hid them earlier and you forgot the undo spell.
So it's one of those things. Being prepared is, what is it? 90% of success. All right, so we're doomed for failure here because I refuse to prepare for interviews. I've decided that in the debates, being over prepared is worse than being under prepared. Oh, is that like a doll that you stick things in for the person you're talking to?
No, in fact, I'd noticed in framing my shot, earlier today, looking at things, that I have this new desktop that I'm very happy with. It's nice, redwood thing, and there's a spot that tends to show in my standard shot like this. So I've decided to place objects there and not discuss them and not touch them, just leave them there as I'm recording other things, right? And this in fact is an Apollo era plastic. Oh, there's no date on it, I don't think. Maybe there's something in that tiny
little
little spot.
Bring it up to the camera so we can see it more closely.
All right, there's this
that's
guy.
An astronaut. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And this is from the moon, the Apollo era. Like, I've had this since I was a kid in the late 60s, right? So, yeah, a little Easter egg spot, right? So, earlier today I had this out there. This is an old microphone, the classic microphone.
The classics. Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah. Nice and rusty and crusty and so forth.
Yeah, like from the 1930s or 20s or something. Yeah.
Yeah, a little later than that, but it looks that cool, right? And I always, you said it, hacking is a good thing, right? I literally hack everything all the time, right? You hack your way around in the market, and messaging, right? What is content? What is marketing? What is communications? Shouldn't I just buy a billboard? No, it's like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get in front of certain people in certain ways and certain times.
So I just edited the text for a course. We're doing these courses with Eisen. And this was the section on hacking. He wants a section on hacking. And he's talking about breaking into things and vulnerabilities and threat actors. And I'm trying to correct all the language to the way I'm used to talking about it. And he comes up with a section on hackers. And I basically told him he should remove it. But he said, well, but. So I said, all right, I'll do a section on hackers. He said, won't you write it up? Because, So I'm trying to think of what the definition I used for hacking was. It was something like creative exploration.
Nonlinear engineering.
Well, no. There's engineering of nonlinear things that's just engineering, but that's a different thing. So, no, but the whole concept is, A, it has to be creative, right? And then the other thing is, and I think this pretty much holds true, you have to be getting around something, right? That is, it's not just, because you can be an artist, very creative, but you're creating to create beautiful things or to reflect your thoughts of humanity, whatever your purpose of your art is. but it's not getting around things. And I think fundamental to hacking is we're trying to get something done, right? Trying to get from here to there. And the problem is, there's a wall here and there's a tiger over there and there's some guy yelling at you over here. And so you decide to get a pogo stick and, bounce and jump the wall. Or you decide you're going to dig because then you avoid all that problem, right? Yep. But whatever it is, the way you get around it, that creative way of getting around things, I think that's a good definition for hacking.
I like that creative way of getting around things. So yeah, just thinking through, there's a process. Some clockwork, some structure. Whether it's an actual lock with rotating cylinders or it's a process where you have to stand here and fill this form out or whatever. And if you look, you're right. Hacking is looking at all that and saying, okay, that doesn't work for my purposes, but I still need to achieve the same end. How do I still get from point A to point B in an acceptable way? And you're right, as that doesn't mean doing anything wrong, criminal, illegal. Policy hacking. That's become such a favorite phrase of mine because it's taking that into account. What is the policy? What laws, rules, regulations? How do I get through this? Not breaking any of them.
Right. No, there's another big issue here.
Not doing what they say.
Yeah, there's another big difference, I think, between, say, engineering and hacking and science and hacking. So science is about repeatability. So is engineering, right? You're trying to devise something which systematically, you understand it's going to do this. And hacking very often is one time, right? It's just, I need to get from here to there. I'm not trying to create the long-term plan for everybody ever to get from here to there, right? I'm just trying to get there, right? Yeah. So you do all sorts of things that, yeah, that's right. Yeah, time limit. Although, there are long-term things that I'm doing to hack, and the time limitation is till I'm dead.
So I'm not always a time limitation, right? That's my whole inevitability curve thing. We can do things now. You don't know you're actually inflecting the future, but they might, right? And you build up this little war chest of things you've done, and as you move down that timeline, you say, "Aha! I'm glad I did that because I pulled that back out and jam it into this slot."
I'll give you an example. It's thoughtful toys, right? So thoughtful toys was the name of a company that I created, I think it was in the 1970s. And, it has a website, thoughtful.com. And there are concepts I had a long time ago that I'm still working my way through. And I'm now pushing 70. I can technically say that because I'm now older, right? So I'm pushing 70. And I figure somewhere, in my mid 70s, I will finally give up on much of the other stuff I do for money, and thoughtful will still be there. And there are things that ideas I had long ago that the technology didn't exist for. And if you look on Thoughtful, you'll find the P&ST division. And I will let you look up the P&ST division because I think it brings to bear the true nature of the way we do things and the way hacking works.
Well, and for the viewers' purposes, that is TOTFUL.com.
That's correct. Yeah, it's about, thoughtful, but taught, for kids, or I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I was going to have it for my kids, but, they're now grown up, so my grandkids. And so probably by the time I get to it, it'll be great grandkids if I survive that long.
I'm not dead yet.
That's right. Not dead yet. People ask me how I'm doing. People ask me how I do it, and I say there's nothing to it. You just sit there looking cute, and when something moves, you shoot.
That works for me.
That's from Tom Lear, one of his great songs about hunting.
Yeah, but all this long, I literally sit here and chew on things I've thought about since I was a kid. Right. And I moved a number of times as a kid, so I know how old I was, pretty closely by where I was. Right. And, 8 years old, sitting on a fence in Colorado, staring up into a cloudless night sky and having read a fair bit and understood a fair bit of how the universe works by that point. And thinking, okay, if I keep going, I hadn't got my head around relativity at that point, but just trying to conceptualize the edge of the universe, right? The mechanism of memory itself. When I was very, very angry, when I was about 5 years old, and I thought that I was thinking to myself, the problem is adults just don't remember being kids. And I asked a grown up, and I said, how old do you remember being? And they said something like 12. And you have to understand, you're 5. What that means, and I asked other people, they say 12, 5, 7, maybe 5, but it was all older than I was, which is a way of saying you're going to grow up, and it's like telling someone they're going to have Alzheimer's. Everything you experienced in your life, you'll never remember any of it, right? All my life I've worked to, squirrel cache little memories to make really clear what I really do remember, because I learned about that fairly early on. Oh, and later on, you'll think you remember things you don't. So when I'm storing a memory, I'm like really clear. This is an actual memory that I know where I'm putting that, as opposed to later on seeing if I can remember something. Yeah, maybe. Right? But I know what I know actually happened because I was there and I wrote it down. Anyways, how that works out, I'm still working on that. You could easily say that it wasn't just that.
I have a few memories from when I was very young. Like, I remembered when I first saw my father, which very soon after and what I remember is the piecing together that my mind did of the things, flashes of light hitting my eyes to recognize my father. But I don't remember anything else, right? I remember that, right? And I remember, some other things, but mostly after I was 2. So we moved from an unincorporated area of Knox County, Tennessee, where I was born and grew up, to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania when I was about 2. And I remember a lot of things about Pittsburgh. I remember, where we lived before we moved to another place in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the kids I played with, and the backyard, and the garages in the back, and also just lots and lots of details about that when I think about it. And friends now dead, and events where, I was almost joining them.
Well, I'm sure I've told you this one before, but still, this is one of my, because at that point, when I was 5 years old, I suddenly realized I'm going to, in the rest of my life, I'll have lost everything, forget everything I've ever known. And I remember sitting there and thinking, okay, what do I remember? I'm 5 years old. I was born in California. I live in Colorado now. And I was scared that I couldn't remember it all. Right. I remember, running through my memories. And after that, during that era, 5, 6, 7 years old, but particularly right then, it was summertime because there wasn't snow on the ground anyways, 1970. And nailing down certain memories. I definitely remember that. And one thing I remembered really clearly at that point was before I could walk, I had one of those playpens. In the 60s, playpens had, holes in the net big enough for an infant to hang themselves, unlike the, fine weave stuff they have now. And my fingers would fit inside it. And I couldn't walk, but I could stand up if I pulled myself up. And I could feel it as I'm saying that. I could feel the cord on my little baby fingers. And when I'm standing up, I could see a lot farther away. It was really cool. It made me very happy. And I'd be playing around. I'd stick my foot in one day, and I put my toes in, because toes are just like fingers, right? And I put my weight on that. And now I'm standing on that foot, and I'm off the ground. I literally levitated myself off the ground. And I climbed up to the top of the playpen. And I'm just so proud of me. My arms straight like this. I got all the way up. I couldn't go any higher. I'm looking around and looking around. I look over the edge, but they're flimsy little things. And the weight flipped it over. And the floor comes up at me really fast. And I landed. And before I had time to cry and react, my little baby brain spinning away going, if I cry, my mom will come running. I've determined that already. And, we've seen that, played that game before. If I don't cry, she won't come running. And if she doesn't come running, I'm free. And I just sat there and I thought about that. I made the decision to not make a sound. I crawled off the thing and it plopped back up. And I was about 15 years old when I explained to my mom how I did that. She never knew. After that, the pen couldn't hold me. I was out.
which is hacking, as we say. So now my memory is notoriously bad. There are certain things I can remember from long ago and certain things I can remember sort of all the time. When I was younger, we spent a fair amount of time in the woods and these sorts of things. And you could, I could go on a walk in the woods for an hour and a half, and just get back. No problem. Just doesn't, never been there before. No problem. I can get back. But like the multiplication tables, not going to happen. I don't remember the multiplication tables today. What's 6 times 7? Well, I remember that 7 times 7 is 49. And I remember that because it's a rhyme of some sort, even though it's not. But and every time I calculate it, I go 49 minus 7 is 42. Got it. That's how I do it, right? 6 times 6 is 36. What's 6 times 7 is 36 plus 6. That would be 42. That's the only way I can do it. Now, so I'm an engineering student. When I was in my teens, I'm going to Carnegie Mellon as an engineering student. And they got all these, formulas. My goodness, integrals. You're supposed to memorize like hundreds of integrals just to be able to solve problems. Right? I could never remember them, but I learned how to derive every one of them. So every time I'm sitting on an exam with a time frame, okay, how do I derive this? Oh, I can derive it. Okay, now I can use it, but I couldn't remember it. So it's just different people are just different at these things. And I think it brings with you different capabilities. And going to at least old school engineering school, it's stand and deliver time. You have to do that job, right? So, either you're going to fail out, which was not allowed for me, or you're just going to find a way to crank up the computational power of your brain, focus more, try harder, whatever, to get it done. So, I did manage sort of to get it done, but it is not in my nature, right?
Well, it's as I've spent a lot of time, thinking about how cognition, how do we think? Accepting. As classic Gen X, apparently, the late diagnosis autism spectrum ADHD thing is its own thing. It's aside from, if your brain works this way, what do you do? If you sort of, do your best to deny it for 50, 60 years, then what, right? But it's all fascinating. And in the context, at the same time, we have, computing going, getting large. Ooh, Zoom, guys. See robot Zoom control? See that?
Yeah, I see it and I can't stand it. I'm glad I don't have it.
I'm trying to turn it off. Now, this is again, don't get me on technology before I finish my last.
No, let's get, turn it off. Tell me how you can turn it off.
I have no idea.
So I'll tell you how you can turn it off.
You look up, you go to the YouTube channel and you say, hey, turn the freaking hand gesture thing off on a OBS bot camera.
You take a screwdriver and you jam it in the thing that turns the focus so it doesn't turn anymore. And then it won't turn. The only problem is you're now giving up a screwdriver for bloody focus. So another camera that's cheaper costs you about $5. So you spend $5.
Well, or better yet, it's actually a couple $100 camera. So
I understand.
But they're good. They're worth it if you use it.
Yeah, better yet, you give it to a friend who you can't stand. And so that they will, for the rest of their life, have this bloody expensive, beautiful camera given as a gift that's always gone, woo, woo.
Well, you got to, this is actually a fun hack to know. You buy an OBS bot camera and give it to one of your friends who talks a lot with their hands. Because that's my problem, because it reads these hand gestures. That means zoom out, or it should mean zoom out. But I talk with my hands a lot, so it misconstrues this, and yeah, that's a sneaky one, right? So you got to know who to give it to. But I'm not going to miss my point though, because computation and AI and yada yada. I'll share this one. I don't know if I told you this one. I'm starting to think that we will never replicate human consciousness in digital form. Period. I think it may be impossible.
I never want to.
All right. But the reason I'm thinking about that at the moment is because we're getting to the computers can do all of this better and better, faster. The nice thing about being human is that we can't, right? That we are forced to narrow it down as to both of our stories. Your story with with algorithms and formulas. Yeah, we can't remember 10,000 of them and always get them exactly right, with binary, quantum. But we have these amazing ability to sort it out and figure it out. The kinesthesia, right? If you're out there in the world, I know Fred and I both know this, but kinesthesia is that thing where you think in colors and shapes and so forth. And synesthetic kinesthesia.
I thought you were talking about kinesthesia, this guy that we know.
Right, well, kines. But it's, with me, learning numbers and learning math and so forth has a lot to do with shapes. A 4 is a square. There is no 8. An 8 is 2 4s stacked up. That's just the way my head works, right? And it makes perfect sense. Because no, we're not
right.
Right?
Yeah.
And a 10 has sharp edges, right? It's kind of like I picture it like a steel keyway, sort of a little rectangle of steel machine. It's got weight to it and sharp edges. It's very definitive. A 10 is, right? They snap together. But yeah, that's the human thing. And I think if we actually try to recreate consciousness, they're doing is just building another brain that works like ours.
I think I told you about this. When I was working at Sandia National Laboratories, I went to the vice president in charge of, I was at Sandia, California. Tom, his last name escapes me for the moment, but great guy. And I told him, I have a great proposal. I just wanted to talk to you about it for a minute. He said, sure. I said, well, Einstein's brain is in the Smithsonian, to be sectioned.
A little macabre.
Why don't we take, we were in this enormous simulation capability for simulating physics. I can guarantee you get an artificial intelligence that's as intelligent as a person if all we do is a really high quality, just absolutely perfect quality model of that volume of space. And then, take that section brain, we get all the physical stuff that's there will be in there. You can model all the chemistry. So he said, oh, that's a great idea. I said, yeah. There's only one problem, which I said, there's only one problem. He said, yeah, what is it? I said, well, I know it's classified, but what's the largest piece of physical space that you can correctly and accurately physically simulate? And he said, oh, yeah, no, that won't work. Oops. So doing, the modeling to actually do what the brain does, that's thing one. Thing two is we're using digital computers for this. Well, I'm sorry, it's just not the physical reality. We are analog devices, and the physics of digital systems is different than the physics of analog systems. And I had, this is one of those things I put off since I was, in my teens, late teens. I was thinking about the problem is in the physical world, right? We have quantum mechanics, physics that gets just way down into the dust of the dust of the dust, right? So small that, all right. So to the extent we have the field equations or what have you, we could, in theory, then calculate, how to build a bridge. However, the computational power is such that it's just not possible. Not just that it's infeasible today, it is not possible because the total volume of computational capacity in the universe that we can get to in however many billions of years it takes to get to that physical space is not enough mechanism to be able to do the computations. So what we have instead is Newtonian physics, which we know to be wrong. Okay, that is to say, we know that wrong is not quite the right word. What we know is that Newtonian physics is good to within, whatever, this amount over this range of situations, right? If it's not too hot, not too cold.
Not too small.
Right. It works, right? So when we build buildings, we don't use nuclear physics to build buildings. We use Newtonian physics, right? And that's how we do that. So now I'm thinking about computers. And, there's the model of computing, which is, the Turing model of a computer, right? And the finite state machine model. And those are great for doing some theoretical analysis, and they can tell you some definitive things about what will never happen or what might happen in any digital system. But what we don't have is Newtonian physics. We don't have a mid-level of physics. So when you try to analyze these big complicated digital systems, what you have is a number of sequences that grows so quickly, so large, that it's like the problem of solving build a bridge with nuclear physics. We don't have an intermediate level. So I had been thinking about that for a long time, and somewhere around the late 1990s, I started to come up with a couple of things for it. So I started to write those down. And 15 years later, maybe it was only 10 years later, I wrote a chapter called The Physics of Digital Information that goes in my digital forensics evidence examination book, and it's now out on the web. So this notion that computers will ever be able to do what the human brain can do is, I believe, refuted when you start to understand the physics of digital information. And it's dramatically different, right? Because the theory is that in the physical world, and this is the theory of forensics, right? That when one thing touches another, each leaves part of itself with the other, right?
Right.
It's called trace evidence, right? And it's a trace because it got physically contacted, and it leaves a part of itself with the other. In the digital systems, it doesn't work that way. Not at all. Because the size of this thing it leaves could be, infinitesimally small. Right? Even if we're only going to go down to the size of an atom, bloody small, right? 6.02 times 10 to the 36 or whatever, 10 to the 23rd molecules per mole, right? So lots and lots of these things. And so when something happens in the analog space of the physical world, blood spatter, right? So, the bullet or the fist hits the face, the blood sprays out. In theory, looking at the final state of all that blood, we can go back in time and find the one and only solution that could have produced it. In theory. In the digital world, it's just not that way. Because every step you lose information. Right? In the analog world, you don't lose information. In the digital world, whatever the sequence was that got from here to there, I might be able to show that from here, cause and effect, I can get to there. But that doesn't mean that I'm here, means that I started here. There are an unlimited number of places, or a very large number of places I could have started from that will all get me to here, because the space compresses as you go forward in time, whereas the analog space expands as you go forward in time.
And that limiting part of it too, right? The hardware and software. The hardware we have, and just illustrative numbers that don't really mean anything, but one of the classics is that there are more pathways through a single human brain than there are particles in the observable universe. Very large number. And 10 to the 24th.
That's true in digital systems too, though, right? There are more sequences.
Right. But, that's just one number. It's a very large scale. And then you start looking at that, the individual pathways don't really mean that much. And the individual junctions, the neurons, are complex, extremely complex computational information systems individually by themselves. So on the one hand, you have all that, relative enormous horsepower just for, conversational purposes. And on the other hand, we have software that lets me see you, even though the hardware of my eyes actually doesn't see you in the world around me all at once. And it doesn't even try to. The software in my head is filling in all the things I'm not focusing on, and that's fine. And I think that's, let me get philosophical for a minute. Again, we are finite beings. Even if we extend our lives and live a billion years, still there's an end, beginning and end.
When you say finite, hang on. We live in real space, so we might be finite in our extent over that space. If you ignore the side effects. So if you talk about our emanations, our electromagnetic emanations, which expand out indefinitely in time, some effect on the rest of the universe and back and forth. But in addition to that, we are, analog world, we're infinitesimal, right? Digital systems have finite granularity. You can't get any smaller. But in the analog world, there is no, yet we figured out any limitation to how small or the minimum actual distance. So it's an infinitesimal. So we're infinite in the inner dimension, but maybe finite in the outer dimension. But that brings me to my theory of the brain and why you're not going to be able to do it in the digital world. It's my current theory, not yet demonstrated to be false or true, hopefully falsifiable, and somebody will figure it out. Our neurons grow. The connections in our brains grow. They grow through an analog process. They fit together with each other in a limited space. They're each growing and they bump into each other and they mold to each other's shape. That shape, when you think about, how your brain works and some signals, the model is that, it's just like a wire and the signal goes through and it goes up and down and whatever its frequency I think it's between 50 and 200 cycles per second or something, like as if it was a square wave. But the actual physics, the actual mechanisms are analog. They have a shape. And my sense is that the actual shape they take is a reflection of the actual analog stuff you saw. And, 10 people seeing the same thing, they may see the same thing, they may think of it the same way, but inside the brain, they have slightly different shapes in the structures that formed and different combinations of things in the brain. So I suspect that because of the analog nature of space and the infinitesimal depth of this, that each one of these things, its shape makes it slightly different in the amount of time, in the way it reacts to different circumstances. And then we have the chemical stuff in your brain, which is changing, the mobility of all these things and changing the other parameters of how they operate over time. So we also have that analog dimension of the environment in which they operate. So I think digital systems will never be able to model that accurately. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't be able to outthink us in doing certain kinds of problems, or maybe everything that we do. But I don't think they're going to get to where they are like us.
Well, and that gets, brings me back to what I was saying a second ago. I think that one of the wonderful things is that we are limited, and that the strength is that we can do this human intelligent, mold the world around us thing without requiring the sheer horsepower approach of, bigger processor. In fact, there was a great, I have to look this one back up.
We're unlimited. We are infinite in granularity, and digital systems are only finite in granularity. We are in continuous space, and they're in discontinuous space. We are much, much fuller in terms of what we can do than what they can do.
Yeah, and more complex in many, many ways. But I'm gonna bulldog this issue because I think that just like you use the word in time quite a lot, right? And there was a great Scientific American article, some paper 10, 15 years ago, but making the argument that the human brain is about maxed in physical size. That the whole sci-fi thing about having a bigger brain with more stuff actually wouldn't make us any smarter.
Yeah, it's slower to get from here to there. Yeah.
Right. So we get the same, I think we get the same sort of thing in the digital world. It's like, well, we'll use quantum computing and everything else. It's like, we may have already maxed out the physics of doing that. And on the software side, because they literally, everybody knows this, I hope, when you see things, what you see every second you're awake, like I am right now, isn't actually the light coming into your retinas and processing the information in your brain. A very small part of what you actually think you're seeing is actually that light coming in. The rest of it is a simulation your brain runs because it knows what it looks like, and it just wants you to have a good view. I think too much of being human is that paring things down, not trying to process larger numbers.
So I was actually testifying in court, and whatever the comment was, I looked at the judge and say, "We see what we want to see," and he said, "That's right," and that's the truth of it, right? And you look at the physiology of it, and it's been proven again and again, right? That even that your focus of attention is one area, but even all of the sensors in your body, they get tuned up and down over time. And if you're not paying attention, or if your body has them tuned in a certain way, you'll only feel those feelings that they are tuned to feel. So yeah, it is the nature of things that we see what we want to see, we hear what we want to hear. And the amazing thing is that we are, and I will call it, as smart as we are. You know the old story, right? The aliens come to Earth, they see us, and there's no life on Earth, and they go, all right, we looked at those guys, nah.
Species self-flagellation. We make up these stories because we think about original sin and hubris and terrible things like that. No, I keep struggling with this all my life, and I keep coming back to it. And maybe it's a biased thing, but I kind of think humans are freaking amazing, right? It's if we ran into another life form that maybe they blew, I don't know, they look different than we are and so forth, but they had all these capabilities. We wouldn't sit there and go, well, yeah, but they're pushing the rocks in all the wrong directions. We go, oh my God, there's a living thing out there that is capable of doing all this physical stuff, that has, gone through moral and emotional and, ethical philosophies and thoughts. And it's amazing, right? And I don't know that there's not, but I don't know that there is. I think we have this attachment with this idea that, yeah, well, there's these deities or super beings or super villains, or when we die, we'll get to this new higher plane. We'll finally see clearly. And I think that's just a lot of dogma. And
right, you brought up super
I think this is it. And it's kind of wonderful.
You brought up supervillains. I think we're going to evolve. You brought up supervillains. And when people say that these days, Elon Musk comes to my mind. Not because I necessarily think he's actually evil, but because it's the Bond supervillain, right? So he started out, he made gobs of money, and then he built the car company with electric cars, and now he's building the space company, and he's starting to have an impact on the world, defensive posture of the United States and other countries in the world because of his satellite communications business. He has built this enormous thing, and now he's starting to use that potentially as power. And people talk about him as, one of the greatest threats to national security because he's gotten so successful. We depend on him. And you have
Howard Hughes had the same sort of, concerns.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Trillionaires. Think about that.
Right. So when, and just to be clear on this one for anybody watching, it makes sense, right? If we're a group, we got 100 people in the woods, and suddenly one of us has more power and control than everybody else put together 1,000 times over. When we're a country and one of us has more money than our own military, we can go buy aircraft carriers and everything else. It's an issue. Now, maybe it's not a quote unquote threat, but it's damn sure an issue, and you're gonna have to figure it out, right? And that's the reality. But it's just a riff on the supervillain thing. But people are just convinced that criminals are smart, and they aren't, and supervillains aren't that smart. But go ahead. You had a different point.
Let's start out here. So this goes back to the Star Wars thing, right? So you watch Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, which is number 4 or whatever in the series after they backfilled.
A New Hope.
Yeah, right. We hope. What happens here is the bad guys are successful, really, really successful. And the good guys are killing off the minions. They kill off more and more, and then finally they get a huge victory. That is to say, all of the so-called good guys didn't manage to die. Some of them survived it, killed off a bunch of bad guys, and they're all, yay, we win. I'm sorry. The bad guys are still in charge. They still have the vast majority of the universe. And let's talk about revenue. And when I say revenue, I mean revenue on the toys. So I looked at this, some years ago, wrote an article on Alt.net about it. Basically, the highest value for the toys is like Darth Vader and the Emperor and the Bounty Hunter, right? And the so-called heroes, they're like, so what? so they win most of the time. Eventually, you might, kill them off. And you look at how it works. You go from the bottom up, and you keep taking out people that are like the minor players. But the big guys are just standing there fine. They just replace the minor players. They've got plenty of resources. So it seems like the battle is nuts. Like the good guys just lose. Good guys finish last, I think is what. So here's my theory. The problem is we're willing to do all this stuff to go after little guys and let them shoot each other and such. But if you're really worried about it, you just take everybody that's over, say, $100 billion and just shoot them. It doesn't take a few seconds. It's very inexpensive. And you don't have to worry about any more supervillains.
He'll have all sorts of other problems, though, right?
I don't know. It's a very small population. You probably, every couple of years you kill 2 or 3 people, and you've eliminated the supervillain problem forever.
Don't condone. No, they and
wait,
and
I have a finger out.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm poor. I'm not a supervillain.
Well, we're near the end of our time. I want to find a happier note to end on that one.
I'm near the end of my time. I'm still. Well, I did the calculation, and I figure if we really expect we can live to be 140 with all the advancements in medical technology and such, I'm less than halfway. And I'm just coming into my prime. I mean, if you figure it out, you can, with good work at it in just the angel investment space, a good statistical approach, you can multiply your money by a factor of 9 or 10 every 10 years, right? So 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, that's 40 years.
So we'll have to put you on the too rich to live list when?
Well, that's so 60 years. That's 10 to the 6th. That's 1 million times what I have right now. I'm not going to make the list.
Well, at least it's a goal.
But that's how far I am. That's the distance between the top and the bottom.
Well, that's a great topic, but both because we have other things we each need to do on our calendars, and because this recording is getting awful long. I'm going to end it there. Say, to you out there watching this, don't forget the hand controls to control your robot camera before it comes and eats your liver while you're sleeping. But otherwise,
do you think it eats your liver when you're sleeping, or is that something from your drinking?
I think it cuts it out and sells it on the black market. I read that online. It's got to be true.
You think the robot cameras do that? Wow. It's intelligence, the